Welcome to Threat and Theory, where intelligence meets insight. Hosted by a veteran of the U.S. intelligence community, we cut past the headlines to show you the world as it actually unfolds. A place where threats are examined before they're obvious, and theory is used to understand what pressure, power, and intent are really doing beneath the surface. Every episode breaks down complex geopolitics, tradecraft, hidden dynamics, emerging technologies, and the human element behind global events. It's like learning chess for the geopolitical world of today. Discover how intelligence actually shapes the world, not through secrets, but through clarity. You're listening to Threat and Theory. Let's begin. I think we've got some really interesting topics. Again, I'm eager to learn. I'm eager for you to educate me on a bunch of interesting stuff that's happening around the world.
I'm looking forward to today's discussion. We're actually going to talk a little today about an area of the world that, quite honestly, I haven't spent a whole lot of my career discussing, and that's South America. It's the one continent that I have not visited.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, well, that and Antarctica.
Yeah.
Penguins don't seem to miss me. But we'll talk about Venezuela and what's going on there, the decision-making process. And most important, we're going to talk about the joint planning process and the intelligence cycle.
Yep.
And how that figures into what's going on and the decision making and the execution of the decision making.
So when I am when I'm first learning about military intelligence as a career, like yourself, is there a book on this joint planning process that I'm handed and I'm told go brief myself on this, or how does that work?
Of course, there's joint publication 3.0 or 3.1, I think it is. There's always a book on everything. There's a manual. There's something that you can always refer back to, and that teaches us how to do the joint planning process. In fact, there are entire courses on the joint planning process. The staff colleges all teach it. All the officers go through that as they progress through their career in learning that process.
So what is the purpose of the joint planning process?
Well, it's really to keep all of the various services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guards, even the Space Force now, all planning along the same line so that we can all kind of speak the same language, that when we get in the same room, we're all using the same processes.
Yep.
And it's a coherent way of, think of it as project management except for war.
Yeah.
And so this is how we plan.
Yep. Every single military activation that happens goes through this rigorous process, even if this isn't something that's around an ocean and the Navy wouldn't be involved, or we still have representatives from each of the different armed forces there.
Very much so. And in fact, when you look at even operations that don't happen, we have contingency plans or operations plans that may never happen. Yep. But we go through the planning process. Each major staff or combatant command staff has what they call a planning staff, the J5. And this staff is tasked with developing and updating their con plans or no plans to ensure that they're up to date, and they use this process to do it. So underneath the main plan, then you have it based on function. Okay. So you have the air campaign, and then you have the ground campaign, then you have the maritime campaign. And the air campaign would be usually, the planning for that would be led by the Air Force, although the Navy and the Marine Corps or whoever has aircraft would also be participants in that. The maritime campaign usually would be led by, the planning for that would be led obviously by the Navy, and the Army or Marine Corps would plan the ground campaign.
So which one of those is the best?
Well, depends which one you're talking about, but I'll always go with the Navy.
All right. So what I'm looking at here, and we're going to put this up on the screen as well, we're looking at 7 steps right? Are we starting here and we're looking at 7 steps, or where do you want to start?
Sure. Why don't we start with the joint operation planning process? Okay. And of course, first it starts with the initiation. That's where the order comes from above. From the National Command Authority says, do this. We need a plan. Let's take Venezuela as an example. So the president or the Secretary of Defense or the president through the Secretary of Defense says to the Southern Command commander, we need to prepare for possible regime change because the president has now made it explicitly clear that is what his interests are in Venezuela.
Gotcha.
And so what happens then is the mission analysis part. And this is where the intelligence community first gets involved. We're going to look at, what does that involve? First thing you need to do, when we look at mission analysis, you're looking at the center of gravity, what of the opponent, and their critical vulnerabilities. The center of gravity is where they derive all of their strength. This is derived from the writings of a man named Karl von Clausewitz, who wrote in the 19th century. And the center of gravity is basically, it could be based on, for instance, in Venezuela, I imagine it would be based on his his narcotics enterprise, or his lieutenants, or his oil, probably his narcotics and his oil. He's deriving his power from those two enterprises. I'm not a Venezuelan analyst, but just looking at it from afar, that's what I'm guessing they're deriving it from. Then you're looking at the critical vulnerabilities. Okay, how is it that you attack those two things? Well, if I go back to Serbia back in the 1990s, because we always look at history as an indicator, you'd probably go after his lieutenants or the oligarchs that surround him, who benefit from the corrupt scheme that props him up. And that's how Slobodan Milosevic was removed in Serbia. We basically started targeting the finances of those folks.
Okay.
And then what you're looking at from the intelligence community then is, that launches the intelligence community part. First of all, they've already done their part as far as identifying the center of gravity and the critical vulnerabilities. They've already done their part. But then they're also launched into, now we get into the various ints. Signals intelligence, human intelligence, imagery intelligence, and then an intelligence that not many people think of when they think of intelligence, but it's financial intelligence. And this isn't usually a Department of Defense type of intelligence, usually run by our civilian intelligence agencies, but that is watching money flow through different institutions. And so how do you target that? How do you stop that flow? How do you cut it off? And that's how you get at people like oligarchs.
Okay. So if that is kind of the application process or the thinking process around joint operation planning, can we apply that to? Can you give me a deep dive or maybe a broad brushstroke into what is happening in Venezuela and why we are starting to apply some of this ethos to the situation there?
Sure. Venezuela back in, let's turn the clock back to, 27 years ago.
Okay.
And 1998. Venezuela was probably among the wealthiest countries in South America. Imperfect, but relatively Western-oriented, had a thriving economy. I wouldn't call it a democracy there was no Thomas Jefferson, wandering the streets, but relatively liberal by the standards of the region. I think it was 1999 or 2000, a man named Hugo Chávez runs and gets elected, promising more equality, solidarity, socialism, everything that this typically promised when those things are brought in.
Yeah.
And he introduces them after a few periods of prosperity, which usually happens in socialism. It's kind of like a sugar high. Then suddenly the economy crashes because of the centralized planning that occurs with socialism. Then he starts shutting down the free press because they're starting to criticize him. Outlaws opposing political parties, starts imprisoning opposing figures. Elections are held, and the exit polls show he's losing badly, and somehow he wins.
Gotcha.
He eventually dies. His successor is Maduro, his hand-chosen successor. Same thing repeats itself. Things just continue to spiral down. Then, in order to help prop up their failing oil industry, which has happened because they've nationalized it, they start getting into the narcotics business.
Yeah.
They're right next door to Colombia. It's not a difficult task for them. And so they become a narco-state. And it's been problematic for our country.
Yeah. Are we the primary? Like they're bringing it here. They're not bringing it. They're not serving it to Europe primarily. They're bringing it here.
A little bit it goes to Europe, but we're the main market. We're just based on proximity.
Yeah.
It costs a lot more in Europe.
Sure.
It costs a lot more to transport it to Europe. And they can get it here. They use Go Fast. They'll take it to an intermediate island country and then straight over to our country.
Yeah.
And so when President Trump was elected the second time, the first time he was already making noises about.
Yeah, he's aware of what's happening, starting to talk about it.
Yeah. He declared that some of these organizations and Venezuela itself were basically terrorist organizations based on the authorization to use military force. And with that, he started treating them differently. It's a different idea because whether one agrees with the policy or not, the fact that we are striking narco-terrorist boats or these go-fasts is a different targeting problem for the military. We have always tried to intercept them, but trying to intercept those high-speed speedboats with what we have is very difficult. Frankly, it's a lot easier to blow them out of the water.
Sure.
It's also a lot more dramatic, and it calls into question human rights and due process.
Yeah.
But I think most people acknowledge that he has the legal right to do it.
Yeah.
Based on the existing laws. If you don't like that, change the laws.
Sure.
Or the Supreme Court may eventually rule the other way. But as for right now, the existing laws would seem to indicate that he has the right to do that.
Yeah.
Now, on top of that, he has problems with Maduro because we're basically dealing with the symptom, not the cure, or not the disease, which is, as long as Maduro's in power, this is going to continue to happen.
So do we have does the U.S. currently have, this is not a war, right? This is a situation that we are dealing with, but is this a code red situation at this point? Or this is amber. This is warming up, it's heating up, where they're saying things, we're saying things. We're in room, there are joint operations in rooms talking about this situation actively, but there is not an active plan per se, or is there an active plan?
That's really hard for me to tell because I never would have thought I'd see the day when we'd have our largest aircraft carrier parked off the coast of Venezuela.
Gotcha.
And we have that right now.
Yeah, so that's a big indicator that this is a situation that's heating up.
This is that's a statement.
Yeah, you put that where you plan to have action.
You're making, if nothing else, you're making one heck of a statement.
Yeah.
And I mean, USS Gerald R. Ford is our most recently built carrier. It's got all the bells and whistles. It's got an air wing of 80 aircraft that that can all make your life miserable.
Yeah.
So it's a statement.
And if I'm not mistaken, so our president has said he wants to see Maduro out of power, and there are people in Venezuela that are supportive of that, or everyone is saying, no, we love the guy, we want to keep him in power, or what is the general temperature if I'm a Venezuelan resident?
I think that most Venezuelans would like to see Maduro gone.
Yeah.
The question is, once an outside entity attacks, do people then rally around the flag, especially if it's somebody like the United States?
Gotcha.
And that's a natural impulse. You can't beat up my little brother, only I can beat up my little brother type of thing.
Yeah.
And so there's always that dynamic involved. The other question is one of the biggest props for Maduro is the Cuban intelligence services, as well as Russia and China, or China, as Trump would call them, are involved in Venezuela. And so how do we make sure that, we cut that off? Now, the other way that Maduro is making money right now is we've already sanctioned their oil. They do have these ghost fleet tankers, and we've started interdicting those and bringing those in a very Trumpian way to the United States and taking the oil. So that's the other half of the equation. So we're basically cutting them off economically, trying to hollow them out from within. I think the next step we'll see is probably economic targeting of the oligarchs that support him, his lieutenants in the security services. We'll see sanctions there. I think we've already started to see that to a limited extent, and in the whatever support base he has. And I'm not familiar with the personalities who do that, but we're going to start seeing. Try to peel those people off, find out who the true believers are as opposed to those who are just the opportunists, and we'll get rid of it, try to turn the opportunists.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing correctly, currently it's about mitigating the impact that they're able to have here in the U.S. with these go-fast boats. So we're seizing where we can, we're blowing up where we can't seize. And then we've also got the oil tankers that we're inactive. We're intercepting those things and creating financial choke points. Is that accurate? That's kind of where it's at currently.
That's right. So when you go back to the joint planning process, you kind of go to the course of the mission analysis, which is kind of looking at okay, here are the levers you need to pull. Then you go to the course of action development. Yeah. And that's where you say, okay, we come up with 3 course of action, typically, the heavy, medium, and small. Heavy, medium, and light. And the heavy would be, going in there with, one of our armored units and, whatever it takes to do that. Medium might be special forces or a Marine unit and helping out. And then the light would be kind of what we're discussing now. Yeah. Might be...
We make things uncomfortable, but there's not direct action taking place on Venezuelan soil yet.
That's right. Yeah. And it might be a combination of those. Yeah. Two. And so then you end up with a course of action analysis and wargaming. Yeah. And that's step 4. Okay. And that's where you kind of, you compare the two, you look at the positives and the negatives, you come and you always come up with this, the pros and the cons of each one. Okay. You send it in front of the decision maker. Decision maker says, well, I kind of like to, then you go to step 5, which is the comparison. And the decision maker goes down and with step 6 and says, I'd like to do maybe a combination of course of action 2 and 3, or just 3 alone, or 3 modified to do this, or something like that. Yeah. very rarely do they accept it as planned or as presented to them. And then you ultimately end up with the op order approval.
Yep.
And that's where you come up with your marching orders.
Yep.
And that goes out in the form of a long message, usually several pages, and it goes to not only I guess it's I think it's an admiral in charge down in Southcom, but also the components underneath them, the Air Force's Southern Command, the Navy Southern Command, the Army Southern Command, and that gives them their marching orders as well. And that's with each of those, then that planning process occurs for their components. Mm-hmm. And they have to then then what they do is, the way the military plans is, we like to use the term, we'll tell you, we'll give you your piece of the pie, but we're not going to tell you how to suck the egg.
Sure.
Here's your mission.
Yeah.
But you figure out how to complete the mission.
Yeah.
And so along each of these steps, you have the intel staffs.
Yep.
And so they're sitting with the planners and they're sitting with the operators, and they're looking at the mission, and along with each of those, they're looking, okay, they're evaluating, okay, this is what we need to do. Mm-hmm. And so they start their planning, and first thing they plan is collections. Mm-hmm. In order to, okay, let's say for the Navy, my job is primarily the oil tankers and the go fast.
Yeah.
So, I probably need to look at working on signals intelligence, human network analysis, to figure out who's talking to who.
Yeah.
Figure out who the networks are for these drug things, so that I can monitor these communications. I can, do whatever it takes to figure out these drug, these drug networks, so that I can continue to develop that network and continue to make sure that I know when these go fasts are going.
Yeah, because presumably they've got allies throughout the Caribbean that they're using as ports and whatnot that are all very aware of what's happening.
That's right.
So that communication network to figure out who's talking to who's helping and whatnot, right?
That's right.
Probably pretty important.
And this becomes an interagency process at this point, because some of our best collectors, the people with the best information, is the Drug Enforcement Administration.
Yeah.
Who's probably not real thrilled, by the way, that we've taken away their mission because they like arresting people.
Yeah.
And now we're blowing them out of the water.
Yeah.
But then there's also the oil tankers. Mm-hmm. And the oil tankers are a situation where, you're looking at a ship, you're imaging it in port, you're seeing if it's refueling or whatever.
Sure.
And so that becomes an imagery problem.
Yeah.
And so you're using imagery intelligence, human intelligence in many cases, through confidential sources of DEA and other confidential sources.
Gotcha.
You're using signals intelligence. And then you're taking all this information, and the next step is processing and exploitation. For instance, with signals intelligence, most of it's in Spanish. Most people like me who are intelligence officers, my Spanish is rudimentary at best.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're using Spanish, which is very colloquial or specific to what they're doing. I can't make sense of it.
Yeah.
So the processing for signals intelligence might be translating that into a format that the analyst can understand.
Sure.
And so imagery, same thing. You might have an image of a large area. The processing for that is, let's cut it down to the area that's needed for the analysis of that image.
Okay.
And so there's that part. Human intelligence is just getting it back into the right people at the right time, and so on. And so we get, so there's that processing and exploitation, and then you get to the analysis part. And the analysis part becomes a part where you're basically making sense of it all.
Okay.
You get all these different types of multi-int intelligence, fusion intelligence, and your job is to make sense of it.
Okay.
Which is all great. You've made sense of it, And then probably the most important part, which people overlook, is the dissemination. And it has to be timely. It has to be to the right people, and it has to be in the right format. One of the mistakes we made when we started going to computers back in the mid-'90s was we said, well, we're just going to post it on our website because everyone will just come to our website. Mm-hmm. But no, that's not how people function. If you have a spot report, you send it to the right inboxes.
Gotcha.
Because that's how the human, if you're a 2-star admiral, you're not going to visit somebody's website.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we call that push communication versus pull communication,
exactly.
Right? So you need to push it to the right people rather than expecting to pull them in to find it.
100%.
Yeah.
Same. That's exactly what we called it. Mm-hmm. And that was an expensive lesson learned.
Yeah.
And a lot of us, figured that out pretty quickly. But we lost some credibility in the meantime. And and it has to be in the right format. One of the first things I learned as an intelligence officer was learning how to brief, learning how to publicly speak. Because by the time I was 3 years in the Navy, I was speaking in front of 4-star admirals.
Gotcha.
And speaking about complex intelligence issues.
Yeah.
It's important that you need to be able to stand in front of somebody and tell them what's going on.
Yeah.
And why.
Yeah.
And why you think that.
So I think you said they were called the J5. Is the J5 the name for there is someone from the Navy, someone from there's someone from each of the armed forces? Is that the J5? Those are the guys that are actually in this planning process room, the watch floor room that they're doing this from?
So that's a great question. And there's the way it's, again, everything's structured similarly in all the services. So you usually have the J1 or the N1 or the S1 or the G1, and that's administrative.
Okay.
And then G2, N2, S2, A2, or whatever. That would be intelligence.
Okay.
So I was the N2 a lot of times in my career.
Yeah.
I was also a J2 once.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the 3 staff or the J3 staff.
Okay.
And that's operations. Also very important to have an intelligence presence there.
Gotcha.
Because that's the current, when things are happening, when you're launching carriers, when you're launching aircraft off the deck, this is usually maybe, sometimes 72 hours in.
Yeah.
You're talking about you're planning the next cycle in.
Yeah.
So they're executing the plan that J5 developed.
Okay.
Then you have the J5, which is plans.
Yep.
And then there's J6 is communications, J7 is training.
Okay.
Yeah. J4 is logistics.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a J5 in the Navy who and forgive me for being naive here. There's someone with the role of the J5 in the Navy who
it'd be an
gets
N5, yeah.
Okay, who gets the call, says, "Hey, we're getting all these guys together. We're going to have a chat about what's happening in Venezuela and how we're going to address that." And is it then that person's role to go back and communicate to the Navy and say, "Hey, this is what we decided. This is going to be the Navy's part of this puzzle," and then the Navy goes, "All right, cool, we're bringing the USS Gerald Ford out there," or does that come from somewhere else and they go, "Hey, by the way, I know you might not have thought about this yet, but put the Gerald Ford off the coast," or is that solely that comes from this operation, this joint planning process? The Navy then does their own intel and decides to put the Gerald Ford there?
Great question. Usually for something like this, where you're actually you're moving major assets between theaters, that's where the joint staff comes in.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about the combatant commands. And really, when you're talking about combatant commands, you're talking about U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. We always hear about Central Command or CENTCOM. That was Norman Schwarzkopf during Desert Storm. Mm-hmm. These are usually the guys who fight the wars. It's not the joint staff. The primary purpose of the joint staff is they have some primary purpose, a couple primary purposes. But one of the purposes is to enable the transfer of units between theaters.
Okay.
And so they'll go back to the chief of naval operations, for instance, and say, "Hey, we really need this carrier in Southcom.
Yeah.
And can you make this happen?"
Yeah.
And then CNO will go back and say, "Make this happen," down through their chain of command.
Yeah. I see.
And so that's kind of where that happens, is at the national level.
Okay, cool. So we've talked a lot about this joint operation planning process as it relates to a really topical, a topical story here with Venezuela. I think that one thing that I was excited to get into too is almost a case study of how this has been done in the past. And you brought it up a little bit in Serbia and Milosevic, but should we dive into a little bit about how these different steps were applied in a Cold War era setting like that in the 90s, and kind of what was at what stage or what theater was being set up there, and what we did there?
Sure. Serbia is an interesting one. First of all, you're dating yourself, because that was post-Cold War.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Either that or I'm dating myself. I'm not sure which. That was actually one of my first. I cut my teeth as a Bosnian analyst back in 92,
Okay.
93, back in the Bosnian War.
Yeah.
And this was back when I was stationed in London. Interesting times.
Yeah.
Obviously, things were going sideways in former Yugoslavia at the time. It had just crumbled. Milosevic was the president of Serbia at the time.
Yep.
I think he'd been the president of the former Yugoslavia, and he was very much not happy about Yugoslavia going away.
I see.
In the meantime, Bosnia, Croatia, and it fought and got its independence really quickly. Bosnia fought a pretty bloody war.
Okay.
Three-way war
Yeah.
between civil war between the Bosnian Muslims, or Bosniaks as they came to be known, the Croatians, ethnic Croats there, and then the ethnic Serbs who were in Bosnia. All intermingled. There were no real front lines almost. It was just an awful, horrible war, neighbor upon neighbor. People who known grown up
Wow.
against each other,
Yeah.
or with each other, just overnight started slaughtering each other. And I'd love to say there were a good guy and a bad guy,
Yeah.
but there really wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just an awful way. If there was a real bad guy, it was probably the Serbs, in the way that they committed some genocidal acts, and
This was like an ethnic cleansing.
that's where the
sorts.
term really kind of
it started here.
Yeah.
Wow.
They put people in concentration camps.
Yeah.
They slaughtered people in Srebrenica, which was an act which was considered genocide by the International Criminal Court. And Slobodan Milosevic remained in power in Serbia, and he was kind of pulling the strings from Serbia. He had a man named Radovan Karadzic in Bosnia, who was kind of the de facto Bosnian Serb leader.
Okay.
But Milosevic was really kind of behind everything. Eventually, there's a portion of Serbia called Kosovo, or there was a portion of Serbia called Kosovo, which was also majority Muslim. There was some real historical implications to that part. That's where the Serbs stood up to the Ottoman Empire back in the, I want to say 16th century, and side of a famous battle, just some real historical implications. It also happens to be where Milosevic made a famous speech back in the 80s, which kind of really lit the fuse for the ethno-nationalism that kind of unraveled Yugoslavia. And so it was, but the Muslims there and started arming themselves, and next thing you know, they're going at war with Serbia, and here NATO gets involved. And so the U.S. and the UN are already involved in Bosnia, and so the question is, how is it that we, we had already been flying missions over Bosnia at that time, and so then the question is, how is it that we take down Milosevic? And President Clinton at the time did a combined air campaign against Serbia. But also, I think the most effective way was probably through the economic pressure and the financial intelligence based on his cronies, and that's eventually was the pressure that forced Milosevic to exceed.
Yep.
And when you look at the joint planning process, so much of that was an air campaign that there were no ground forces involved. It was entirely by air, and it was done in a coalition sense through NATO staff. NATO uses the same planning processes that we do, which is useful.
Yep. Yeah. So this was a 78-day NATO air campaign, and I'm just tracking here. But to give a few more stats, so Kosovo was 98-99. To your point, no ground invasion, no UN Security Council mandate, and the targets were Serbian military infrastructure, regime command and control, and economic pressure nodes.
Yes.
Yeah, 78 days they did all that, though, with NATO support.
That's right.
Yeah.
And, and it was all entirely air, and really the economic nodes was the big one there.
Yep. And we talk a little bit about the effects of Milosevic's regime. And I think that is that region. I mean, we call that region the Balkans, right? And I mean, maybe you can point this out to me because I'm not. I've never been to this part of the world.
Sure. If you were to go to Italy,
yep.
Go east across the Adriatic Sea.
Yep.
And there it is, north of Greece.
Yep. Is that so north of Greece? I mean, this is a mountainous terrain.
Very.
Yeah, very mountainous, tough. Probably really tough to fight on the ground. Then, right? Like. It's a lot easier to strike from the air, which maybe is a part of why you would take you would plan for something like that. Do you have thoughts on that?
That and it's just cheaper. And quite honestly, I don't think you ever want to be involved in a campaign on the ground in the Balkans. Like you said, because it's mountainous. So many ethnic factions.
Okay.
There's just Germany got involved there in World War II and basically got their butts kicked by the partisans.
Gotcha.
The Yugoslav partisans who were led by a guy named Tito. Tito ruled Yugoslavia for several decades.
So how did we ultimately get Milosevic to fall?
It was really his deputies who, the oligarchs around him basically said, thanks for playing, but here's some parting gifts, and the International Criminal Court is waiting for you.
Yeah. So do we have any idea what ultimately happened to him?
He went to The Hague. I think he was imprisoned, if I'm not mistaken.
Where would you go to prison for an international crime like that?
Honestly, don't know where his prison was. Maybe in Belgium.
Okay, interesting.
Netherlands. Where's The Hague? Is The Hague in the Netherlands?
I have no idea.
It's somewhere in Europe. It's probably nicer than the Yugoslav prison or Serbian prison.
Sure.
Yeah.
But presumably, do we have any idea how old he would be at this point? Was he an old man when in the 90s?
I think he'd be dead by now anyway. He died in prison, and I think I'd have to look see what happened to him. Quite honestly, I kind of lost track of him after.
After he's out of power and he disappears, and is that that part of the world healing at this point? Is it how are we doing over there after he's we're talking late 90s, right?
Oh yeah, they're total Jeffersonian democracy. Yeah.
Okay,
as always happens.
Yeah,
no, Serbia. They went with kind of a reformer.
Okay.
To take his place.
Yeah,
and he lasted about 2 years before he was assassinated.
Oh wow.
And so Serbia's kind of been one of those twilight places that's just never quite made it.
Gotcha.
Croatia is more or less Western.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting part of the world because you end up with, it's the intersection of the Eastern Orthodox, which is Serbia, and they all have Croatia. They all speak the same language, which is Serbo-Croat, which is a Slavic language. But the Eastern Orthodox Serbs use Cyrillic alphabet. The Croats use the Roman alphabet. They're Roman Catholic. Then you have the Muslims, Bosniak Muslims, who are kind of what happened when the Ottoman Empire advanced, and and with them you have the Kosovo or Albanians and then the Albanian Albanians, and they're Muslim, and so it's really an uncomfortable mix of cultures there, and I don't know that you're ever going to end up with a Western democracy per se. Maybe Croatia. Slovenia, which was the northernmost republic, is probably the closest to those to Western democracy.
They've got great basketball players, though.
They do.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah. Those guys are great. The last topic that I think you wanted to discuss here was how this applies in Operation Desert Storm.
Yes.
And are we at a point that would be good to dive into that?
Yeah, and I really want to talk about the intel cycle there.
Okay.
Because this was an interesting case. Everyone talks about, I think it was a 100-day war.
Okay.
And everyone, for those of you, I kind of date myself because this was when I was a junior officer in the Navy. A lot of people who might be watching this, both of you.
What year are we talking about here?
This is 1990, 1991. I think the Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in August 2nd, 1990. And remember, it was that day very specifically. And it was he basically was just a pure power grab.
Yeah.
He wanted their oil.
Yeah.
And Kuwait wasn't too thrilled about that, but he took people out, started executing them on the street, which was rather impolite of him, and basically took over the oil fields. And that's when George Bush the senior basically said, "This will not stand." Also,
were we getting all of our oil from there, and so we were in support of Kuwait because they've been great partners of ours? Or
Kuwait was a much more reliable ally to us. Already, Iraq had been problematic, although we had supported them in their war with Iran just months earlier. It ended, I think, probably a year earlier.
Yeah,
they had just gotten out of a multi-year, absolutely bloody war with Iran. And for whatever reason, Saddam Hussein decided, I think it's because, frankly, he was bankrupt from the war. He needed money, so he went south to Kuwait where they had nice oil wells.
Yeah. So I just go the other direction and then attack those guys.
That's right.
Yeah.
So Kuwait became his 19th province or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so Kuwait, had no real means of defending itself, suddenly became, in Saddam's eyes, part of Iraq.
Yeah.
And so first thing we did was we put people in Saudi Arabia, said, you're not going an inch further.
Yeah.
And, George Bush and Margaret Thatcher got together and said, this will not stand. Said, you got to leave. This is not cool. Tried to negotiate him out of it. In the meantime, we built up forces. I think at one point we had, I want to say 500,000 coalition forces. Wow. And when we're talking U.S., European, Arab, forces from all over the world in the desert of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. What do we think the population is of that entire country anyways?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's probably, if we put 500,000 boots on the ground, we're probably talking about a region that is not a whole heck of a lot bigger than that anyways, right?
And we're all stuck in the middle of this desert. Which is unoccupied. So it was, there we are in plus more on ships out on the, off the coast.
Yeah.
And so that's when the planning process starts. Okay, what does the president want? He wants to remove Saddam from Kuwait or from Kuwait. That's the mission. We're going to remove them from Kuwait. How are we going to do it? And that's where you get into the course of action analysis.
Okay.
They come up with basically their concept of ops, which they come up with is extended air war to degrade their defenses.
Yeah.
And then a swift ground war, which will cut them off and kill them.
Yep.
And the air war was genius. First thing we did was we cut off their command and control, except for a few nodes that we could continue to monitor because it's good to be able to collect intelligence. And then we started in on their forces.
Okay.
And this is where the intelligence part comes in, is, okay, how is it that we are going to determine when to start the ground war? Because that's when there was a big decision point. And so the decision point was based on intelligence. And the intelligence was, when is the Iraqi Republican Guard Corps considered combat ineffective? And by combat ineffective, we judged that by saying 50% of their armored vehicles were destroyed or damaged to effect where they're inoperable. And so what we did was we got analysts from DIA and CENTCOM or throughout the theater, and every day we'd go, after we got through the first phase where we cut off their command and control and did all that, and we started going after these Republican Guard units in Kuwait. And we'd start bombing their armored units. And every day our analysts would then go and count how many did they have and how many were damaged.
Using imagery at that point?
Using imagery, overhead imagery, and we'd just go through and, this one's at 70%. Now it's at 68%. Now it's at 64%. Oh, we had a good day. Now it's at 54%. And there were 3, I think, Republican Guard Corps units, units there, and eventually we got to the point where all of them were 50% degraded. And that was the go. And so on that day, we launched the ground war. And so it really became that simple. It became a bean counting exercise for our imagery analysts. And sometimes they disagreed. DIA said, "Well, that one may be destroyed." Depending on, so they'd go back and hit it.
Sure.
So it was really that simple, and so that's how intelligence drives operations. There was a decision point based on the work of the intelligence analysts.
Can I ask a silly question in that you mentioned are the oil fields in Kuwait, like, are these the biggest oil fields in the world or the most leveraged oil fields in the world?
I wouldn't say they're the biggest. I think those are probably Saudi Arabia. I'm not 100% sure on that, but they're substantial.
Yeah, they're substantial. And you mentioned they really didn't have any way of defending themselves. I just think if I had a reserve of something that was like so globally valuable, wouldn't you need to have a way to defend it? Or nobody had really messed with them before and it didn't really matter?
Yeah, I think, it was probably, they're a very small country.
Yeah.
And a very wealthy country. And I just don't think they ever saw a threat.
Yeah.
I don't think they ever, they always thought, Iraq and...
Has that changed now? Or they rely on ally nations to kind of protect them if they need it?
We have a permanent presence in Kuwait.
Yeah. I see. I gotcha. Yep. And that's something now that we're still buying product from them, so we protect the product for them, and we make sure it doesn't fall into anyone else's hands. Is that
I think there's a fairly strong understanding among the regional powers there that we've done it once, we'll do it again.
Yeah, I gotcha. Interesting. Is that a part of the world that you were very versed in? Like you worked on a lot of operations that were in that zone, and that was something when you were more of a junior in the Navy?
My first deployment was 88 and 90, and we deployed to the Middle East.
Yeah.
But quite honestly, I was looking at Iran. Mm-hmm. This was back when they were interdicting tankers. They were still at war with Iraq.
Yeah.
And they were, mining the Strait of Hormuz and doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so we were really, I think right before I got on station for my first deployment, we had sunk most of their Navy with Operation Praying Mantis. And so we were very fixated on Iran. At the time, we had said we're never going to send an aircraft carrier into the Persian Gulf because it's too constrained. That changed very quickly with the Desert Storm. I think we ended up sending in 5 or 6 aircraft carriers.
Wow, a big operation.
That was a big operation. Probably might have been the largest ground operation we had since World War II. Much larger than Operation Iraqi Freedom as far as the number of forces.
Wow, very cool. Is there anything else that you'd like to cover off on as it relates to this joint operation planning process?
Just one other thing, and really, and more or less the Intel cycle, and just the way it works for how Intel shapes ops. Zero Dark 30, great movie.
Yep.
Very realistic in some ways, not so realistic in others. We don't beat people like that. In fact, it took a presidential authorization for an open-handed hand slap. But there's a lot of hard intel work that went into capturing one guy.
Yeah.
10 years of intel work.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was based on very unsexy analysis.
Sure.
For instance, one of the biggest breaks is we had this name of this courier, and we gave it to Mohammed, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was the number 3 guy. This is the Ron Jeremy guy.
Yeah.
The guy we captured in Pakistan in 2003. And he's the number 3 guy in Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
And we captured him, and we said his name to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and said, I don't know him. And then we had, I guess, bugged his cell, and we heard him basically telling everybody else in that he was captive with, don't say this guy's name.
Yeah.
Nobody knows this guy. And so we knew this guy was important.
Yeah.
And so you start following these trends, and it takes that long to build it, to find these networks. And where the movie kind of gets it right is, you're using human intelligence.
Yeah.
And then you're using the signals intelligence on the streets of, I think it might have been Karachi, where they're kind of following this SUV around. And then you're tracking it back to this one single compound. Then you have the imagery intelligence, which you have a shadow of a guy, walking around on the thing. And then then you're planning the mission.
Okay.
And the mission is so specific for a SEAL.
Yeah.
When you get down to what the intelligence people are planning for a SEAL, one, you're looking, okay, how big is that courtyard? Can we fit 2 helicopters in there?
Yeah.
But 2, what are those doors made of?
Yeah.
Which way do they open?
Yeah.
Do they open in or out or left or right? So that your SEALs know what to expect when they're going in. This is the type of granular intelligence that it goes all the way from, where's Osama bin Laden to which way does that door open?
Sure.
And that's the breadth of intelligence that is required all along this process.
In that scenario, when they're getting down to those granular details, are they actually are they doing dry runs in environments that simulate that compound?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was yes. I won't say much more than that.
Yeah. But we actually because here in the Western world, maybe our doors are 6.5 feet, and maybe over there they're different. You want to know when I'm carrying equipment what it feels like to go through spaces that walk into rooms, maybe the rooms, like here, bathrooms are on that side and closets are over there. Maybe it's flipped, I don't know, but you want to familiarize yourself as much as possible with what that actual environment is going to feel like.
Yeah. Now I doubt that they knew what it looked like specifically on the inside, but I imagine that they had probably seen it before based on several mock-ups that they might have gone through.
Yeah.
And so, I would imagine that this was not the first time they ran that mission.
Yeah.
When they got in there.
When you, because, obviously Zero Dark 30 has made critical acclaim. It's a huge motion picture. Things are probably dramatized in a way that help sell tickets and make this as impactful as possible. When you, with your background, watch something like that, do you watch it with pride or do you watch it with critique and like a critical eye? Or can you bridge the two and recognize the artistry that it is and also recognize the deficiencies in some of the other areas?
It depends on the movie. And first of all, I got to say, Jessica Chastain's character is actually a composite character. It's several people. But a movie like that, I think that other than the first part where they're totally, I get it. You're trying to grab the audience. But that was a little over the top. But other than that, I think I look at a picture like that and say, yeah, that was pretty well done.
Yeah. Now,
there's a lot of movies I watch where they're, saying, I can, read what type of label he's got on his cigarettes or whatever. Sure. And I'm just saying, well, okay, if you can do that, you're a better person than I am.
Yeah.
But, or they're looking at moving imagery from a satellite.
Sure.
I'm thinking, well, okay.
You understand the actual limitations of some of that equipment, I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that frankly it just isn't. We just don't do it.
Yeah.
Now maybe somebody does, and I'm just not privy to it.
Sure.
But
are you Big Brother?
It could be. I always found that, quite honestly, one of the most fascinating parts of intelligence, and we talked a little bit about it with the analysis and that fusion analysis, isn't just the capabilities of our collection, but also the limitations that each one of them has.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, with human intelligence, it's really good at getting somebody's intentions, but it's also, there's always a time lag. So you're not getting it the next day. It's usually weeks later.
Yeah.
Signals intelligence. It's, it's also very good in some ways, but you're only able to get what is being transmitted. And so you're kind of dependent on what's out there.
Yeah.
Imagery intelligence. You're getting a snapshot from space or from somewhere else. And so that imagery intelligence, it'll tell you what's happening at that moment in time, but then it's gone.
Yeah.
And so you're never sure what's happening 10 minutes before it and 10 minutes after it.
Yeah.
And so you're always having to kind of work with imperfect information.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's why intelligence analysis is imperfect, but it's about fun.
Yeah. Well, it probably takes a really special type of brain to recognize what it is and what it isn't, and how to apply that in a really practical manner that is impactful and as effective as you guys have proven to be.
Well, it's a great job for the curious.
Yeah,
it's really a great job for the curious, and it's a great job if. One of the things I really enjoyed about it, and we talked about it, is you're always tied with you're always in the middle of the action.
Sure.
Of the planning process, of the operations process. You always know, you're always right in the middle of what's going on.
Yeah.
You're helping to make history. I was, the first part of Operation Iraqi Freedom, I was a current intel operations officer at NAVCENT, for the Maritime Component Commander for the invasion. So when we were taking down the offshore oil terminals, I was on there, I was on duty when we were,
Wow.
So it was cool. I mean, you're always having fun.
Yeah.
When we were in the, obviously when we were in the Balkans, I was in the middle of that stuff. So
yeah, very cool. Well, I want to say thank you again. If you guys like this type of content, be sure to let us know. If you guys have topics or ideas or things that you want to hear us talk about, we're all ears, and we'd love to explore some topics that are of relevance to everybody else. So, Howard, I want to say thanks again for coming on today and enlightening me again.
Thank you, and I really appreciate the time, and I really enjoyed our conversation today. Look forward to it again.
Absolutely. All right, we're out.